talk about climate risks. I mean, how big an issue is that for Aon and its clients?
It's front and center right now because, apart from the social impact, right, which I don't want to minimize, right? I mean, that's often written about. It's a political issue. It's a real issue. It's a popular issue. And there's lots of, entities around the world trying to figure out how to reduce energy consumption, go to clean energy. And there's a huge dynamic friction between those desires and poverty in the third world. And I don't think that there's an easy answer, but there is a willingness by corporations like Aon and governments to solve that problem. But for the insurance industry, the way that it's manifested itself primarily has been, if you look back at the last 5 years, of loss activity, not just the potential frequency and severity of wind events in the US and say Japan earlier, but also what we call in our industry secondary perils, like flood. There seems to be more of them associated with wind events. You think recently in Germany, and then some of the sort of hurricanes like Ida that came onshore seem to last longer, penetrate inland more with greater sort of rain events and sort of calamitous flooding in the northeast, which is unusual. But also you see you saw the same thing in Australia in the last few months, but also, wildfire, right? So wildfire in California, wildfire in Australia, wildfire in Portugal, drier, conditions lasting longer, not just set alight by human, man-made events being like sort of transmission outages, but also by lightning, by more severe weather patterns. And those things for insurance companies are actually very difficult to model relative to the way that they were looking to sort of parameterize and evaluate those risks in the past. That potentially has fundamentally changed. So the reason I say potentially is because in all sort of recorded weather events, you'll always find periods where there's been severe losses. And so the question is the last 5 or 7 years indicative of what's going to happen in the next 5 or 7 years? And there's no real answer to that, except that it's probably the high degree of probability that the frequency of sort of hurricanes in the US has gone up. I think historically people looked at sort of 10, 15 years ago, 1.5 landfalls a year. Now most reinsurers and insurers sort of look at risk as sort of 2.5 landfalls a year, right? But then there's the severity. And so the actual cost of those events has risen. And it's risen because there's more buildings, more people, but also they seem to, because they're wetter, there seems to be more loss associated with them as a consequence. And what is the quantum of that loss and how long lasting it is? And that actually impacts how much capital the insurers are willing to put against those risks, and how analysts, if they're public companies, sort of view that risk, because analysts, typically investors, don't like volatility, and reinsurers are solving for volatility. So the extent that volatility is more difficult to measure, then investors get less comfortable with that risk. So in that sense, today what we've seen is that rates have started to rise, not just because of losses that people have paid out, but because people are less willing to put capital to work against the risk when they're not entirely sure what the outcome is.